Welcome. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. If y'all would like to take a few minutes, like a few seconds, I guess, each, we have 5 guests. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, whatever you'd like to share.
Let's start with Candra.
Oh, okay. Hey, I'm Candra McRae, and I am a Tableau Zen Master and Tableau Public Ambassador. Professionally, I am the CEO of Lamotus, which is a boutique analytics firm that is focused on enablement and data visualization with Tableau. And I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
We are
Selma?
So excited to have y'all.
Hi, I'm Selma. I lead self-service analytics at Carter's, where I work to enable the business to own their own advanced analytics solutions. So work really hard to kind of take the tools and technologies that would traditionally sit in IT and offer them to the business.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, Selma.
Thank you for having me.
How about Melanie next? My friend Melanie, who I haven't seen in a while.
Yes, hi, Miss Anna. It's great to see you. Yeah, my name is Melanie Manning. I'm an analyst. I have worked more than 20 years in my career, and it's been wide ranging. I've worked in all kinds of areas in accounting and financial. I've been a financial analyst, a banker, a consultant, had my own consultancy in Tableau as well for 5 years. And the last 2 years, I've been an operations manager for a company that lends money to help patients pay for healthcare at no added cost. So I've been, using data my whole career from all different angles. I'm a Tableau dashboard developer for sure, but the cool thing about, what I've gotten to do throughout my career is find new ways to work with data and leverage data. And so, yeah, thanks for having me today.
Thank you for joining us. All right, what about Michelle?
All right, thank you for inviting me. I'm Michelle Frayman. I'm a Tableau Public Ambassador, and I've also worked with data all throughout my career. Most of my career has been in IT and IT security. And the last couple of years, I managed to translate my passion working with data into data visualization and a full-time role. I started using Tableau Public to participate in Makeover Monday and really got engaged with the community and love participating in a variety of the community projects.
Excellent. Well, thanks. We're so excited to have all of you guys with us. I think Anna has the first question, but our questions are
Steph yet.
I'm so I'm so sorry, Steph.
I was like, or was I zoned out for that one?
It's also that it's hard because I can't see everybody on the side. Please, Steph, take a minute to introduce yourself too.
No, that's quite all right. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I won't have to introduce myself because these extraordinary women. So hey everybody, I'm Steph Caldwell. I'll start by night. I am the author of Manifest Her and the founder of the Manifest Her network and podcast. But by day, I think about data and people like you guys all day. So I lead business development at a company called Narrative Science. We are the minds behind Quill for Tableau and Lexio, which is the world's first data storytelling platform. Thank you, Jen. Love you so much. So it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me, ladies.
So excited to have Steph here too. All right, so we're going to start by talking to Michelle, my friend Michelle. I'm so happy to see you. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of your journey. And, women often come from non-traditional backgrounds or have an employment gap for whatever reason. What type of work were you doing earlier in your career, and what soft skills translate to being a great employee?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I'm so excited to see you too. So my first job out of college was writing documentation for a small software company. It took advantage of the writing skills that I learned as an English major in college, but really my passion was information technology. And I had learned that as part of my mechanical engineering courses, which I started off college with before switching to being an English major, and also some internships that I had during the summer. I took the opportunity to work towards a role that inspired more passion by building a bug tracking system, providing technical support within the company, and helping to build out their network. these were all outside of what I was originally hired to do, but I saw the need there and I learned what I needed to fill it. For me, showing up, working hard, and following up are some of the biggest like skills that I can think of. You don't have to know the answers, but taking initiative, finding them, getting back to people quickly makes a huge difference. Some other transferable skills are the ability to ask good questions, research when you don't know the answers, follow up, and networking to meet people and know how to find the right person who can help you answer a question or find a solution. You don't always have to do it for yourself, and knowing how to ask for help is super important. And I guess the last thing would be organizational skills and being detail oriented.
That's excellent. That is good advice. All right, we've got a question for Melanie. So Melanie, can you tell us perhaps something, what is it that you wish you knew earlier in your career when you started your career? What comes to mind?
Well, Karen, there's so many things I wish I knew earlier in my career. You know, I've got, now that I've got a few years under my belt, I've definitely learned a lot of lessons. I could tell you a few. You know, one thing, I'm going to echo Michelle's feedback from what she just said about, you know, it's okay to be vulnerable and admit when you have a knowledge gap. Like I tell my kids, you know, I can't help you if I don't know what's wrong, right? So, you know, you have bosses around you, you have peers around you, you have people who are there to support you and whatever project you're working on to be successful. So yeah, if you communicate with these folks and lead with trust, that the information, you know, if you have a gap, that they will help you. No one expects you to be perfect. Sometimes we hold ourselves to a standard where we kind of expect ourselves to be perfect, but you know, the truth is that no one is. So, you know, ask for help when you need it. That's one good piece. Another one, and it's kind of along those same lines, is don't be afraid to ask questions. I see that as a curiosity thing. And in my experience, curiosity is rewarded. So, you know, I've got a woman who just recently started working for me back in January. She's asking lots of questions right now, and I love it. She's asking questions about procedures that I put in place, you know, and maybe it's calling out a thing we can do better, that maybe when I put it into place, it wasn't perfect, right? So I'm encouraging her to ask me questions all day long because she's helping the total product be better. So, you know, that has been consistently true throughout my career. You know, another big one is to have confidence in your own judgment. You know, do what you think is right. Speak up, even if you have a dissenting opinion. You know, you might not be certain that you're right, but there are ways you can still bring up your perspective to just have it considered in the moment. That includes, you know, disagree with your boss or even the CEO. You know, if there's something that you see, have confidence in yourself to speak up about it. And I can tell you, you know, looking back on my career, I don't have many regrets. I'm really happy about the path I took, and I've tried out a bunch of different industries, a bunch of different roles, but the only regrets I have relate to this one, you know, moments that I didn't speak up when I, you know, wish I would have, or even times that I spoke up, but I didn't advocate strong enough for my position. You know, I just sort of brought it up and just kind of let it be brushed aside. You know, moments like that, you know, those are things that are important, and you know, they make you feel good about the work you're delivering, and they also help to have an impact on your organization. And one last thing I'll say before I wrap it up is you know, this is true in work and in your personal life, but you know, especially where they cross, is don't let the judgment of others stop you. So, you know, you're going to make decisions that work best for you personally, that work best for your family or your lifestyle. And, you know, don't let the judgment of others stop you from any of that. Do what's right for you.
Melanie, that is solid advice. And I know you meant it in a way from what you've learned, but I think if I had heard any of these things even 5 years ago, would have and listened to it would have changed my world. I'm still learning a lot of this already. Candra, the next question is to you. I would like to know, and we'd like to know about an inflection point in your career journey where you felt drawn to work with information and data and just data visualization as a whole.
Yeah, so I have a kind of a non-traditional background. So undergrad in poli-sci and economics, and a lifelong aversion to math. So that, just, I don't know, like, and even now, like doing math in my head kind of gives me like sweaty palms. But outside of that, I think the inflection point that I had was, while I was getting my master's degree at UGA, and I realized that I liked the numbers because it was an objective way for me to have conversations with people, because opinions are great and I think they have a place, right? But then the numbers and the stories that the data could tell gave insights that you wouldn't be able to, get otherwise. So, I was kind of drawn to it, and then also drawn to the fact that you don't have to be a mathematician to do data. And once I figured that piece out, and I said, I have not only there's a space for me, but I can also blaze a trail with data, even with my non-traditional background. Like, that's where I was like, let's go, like, buckle up, buttercup, and let's make a move here. So that was kind of the inflection point, and I've been here ever since. So that's so that's it.
Thought I was off of mute. Candra, I think a lot of people are excited to hear your story there. Like, that's the honesty, the full truth you had there with the math. We love it.
Yeah,
I love math.
Because it's easy when you see, I always like to say comparison is the thief of all joy, right? And so when you see people that are like computer science backgrounds and they're like coding their entire lives away, and you're like, oh man, I can't possibly do trigonometry in my head like them. I must not belong. And I say BS, right? Because there are so many different facets of data. You just got to find the lane that speaks to your talents as well as your interests, and live there, and you can, and it will work. I've built a career off of this for like the past, I don't know, 15 years. Oh my gosh. I'm an elder millennial. And so
it's really good to hear you say that, though, especially as a new Zen master, just to hear, for the rest of us to hear from someone that has achieved like that level of success in what they do, and is just willing to like say, like this, I never felt like this was like math was my biggest strength or whatever. It just, sometimes I think people can be intimidated. So it feels like relief to hear someone be honest and say that. So I appreciate that.
I always say my design aesthetic is simplicity. And a lot of people think that there's no complexity in simplicity, but like, I would say for me, the opposite is true, right? And so that's where I tend to live, because it's really about how do I distill this down to the place where anybody off the street can understand what I'm trying to go for, and could build it and say, you know what, this is something I can do. That's the lane that I like to operate in professionally, as well as within the Tableau community.
Well, I love that you stepped over the thing that was getting, or that could have gotten in your way, and just said, no, I'm not going to hear that, and I'm just going to keep going. And then you're here to blaze that trail and show others that they can do it too.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I leaned into that stuff. So I didn't avoid stats, because I love stats. But I found a way to distill it in ways that I can understand. And regular people, who are regular people that are not mathematicians, or are, as kind of that more traditional background, can understand as well, right? We kind of, neutralize it if in a way. So that's kind of, I don't know, my story is kind of weird.
Love that. I have a question for Selma. Selma, do you have a mentor or a sponsor? Like in your journey, have you had at least one person who you've gone to learn from? And if so, how do you find that person?
Yeah, so that's something I sought out mentorship relationships, I think, very early on in my career. Just on a personal note, we immigrated to the States when I was very young. So I was the first one in my family to finish college. My parents worked blue collar jobs, so I was the first one to kind of go into corporate. And I was scared. I think like many of us were kind of, you know, navigating post-college life, like how was I going to find a job, what was appropriate, what wasn't, and how was I going to navigate that. So I always kind of sought out those types of mentorship relationships. And I think the way that I approached it is I looked in my network and to people that I knew who were in positions that I wanted to be in, you know, that I aspired to, and somebody who had a similar background to learn from, right? So if I could find the mix of two, right, like they had a very similar background to me, but they were also in a position that I wanted, that I was aspiring to be in, it was a good mix. And the way that I approached it, somebody told me, they're like, just invite people to coffee and ask them to learn about themselves. Like people love to talk about themselves, so don't be shy. And I was like, okay. So I started inviting people to coffee and to get to learn a little bit more about their experience, and then kind of share a little bit about me to see if it was the right fit. And sometimes a lot of those relationships grow organically, right? Where it's a good fit, like it's mutually beneficial. They can learn from you and your experiences, or they're happy to help you and share from their experiences. And what I always kind of sought out was like, what's their story? What obstacles did they have to overcome, and how did they overcome them? And particularly with, I think, women in this space, there are so many shared experiences that I could foresee myself, right? Like, so if you had to overcome being the only woman on your team, or not being taken seriously because of that, right? Like I could foresee myself kind of having the same challenge. So learning from their experiences, right? How did they overcome that? I think it gave me a lot of good insight and really set me, paved the way, right, for my growth trajectory that I think, had I not had that insight, would have been a little bit different.
Excellent. I've got a question now for Steph. So Steph, we've talked a little bit about advocating for yourself, and it's mentioned, you know, sometimes women aren't the best at doing that. So my question is, when you look out, if assuming you see any disparity between men and women in their careers, how much of that is due to women not advocating for themselves?
I love this question for many reasons. One is I think that the answer is a bit more nuanced than the question. And so if it's okay, I'd like to just share in my perspective, and others could disagree. This is my perspective on the topic. As a gender, women are the furthest we've ever been, right? If you look back to the 1920s, the 1950s, 1980s, you couldn't argue that those women who were participating in any level of society in the 1920s were not in the position that we are privileged to be in today. And so I think it's important to recognize the fact that as we've progressed as a society, as technology has progressed, that women have advanced in their position in society, period, end of sentence. That doesn't happen when you don't have self-advocacy. That doesn't happen when you don't have allyship. And the answer to your question, Karen, is yes, we do need to continue advocating for ourselves. Yes, we do need to continue finding allies in the workplace. Yes, we do need to continue educating ourselves and growing our careers. But to answer the question, just, are we self-advocating enough, or are there other factors here? Yes, there are other factors here. I know there's a few econ majors on here. There's like the macroeconomic trends, which are honestly pretty promising over the course of a century, right? And then there's the more microeconomic trends, if you will, of 2020 obviously impacted women disproportionately to how it impacted men. We do need to address that. But so now specifically, do women need to self-advocate more? Yes. And I think that we have, as a society, made self-advocacy kind of a dirty word, right? Because that means that we're not advocating on behalf of our teams or our people or anything like that. I argue that you can be one amazing advocate for yourself and an incredible advocate for others, because we don't do any of this alone, right? We exist on teams. We were born of two parents. We exist in communities. It's important that we recognize that we're not doing any of this alone, but it is also important that we confidently stand up for ourselves. And Melanie shared a really thoughtful insight, I thought, as it relates to self-advocating in your career or advocating in general, right? You see an issue, you see a problem, you should say something about it. I had the privilege of sitting down with a really brilliant man, Stephen Harris, the ex-CDO of VMware, on a podcast episode that actually is coming out this week. And he talked about a part of his career when he was in his early 20s, and he was working for NASA on a mission critical mission, and saw information in the data that led him to believe that there was going to be a critical failure in one of the rockets that NASA was launching. And he advocated, within his line of command, that he didn't think that with the information that he was seeing, they should continue with the launch. And they did, and there was loss of life. And so when he talks about the power of advocacy and what really great data stories can do, and with the right person bringing that data story to the table to either push business in one direction or push it in another, I think that that's just a really powerful reminder. So self-advocacy has many masks, many forms. All of it I promote, while also realizing that we exist in communities, and it's important to not only advocate for ourselves, but for our team members as well.
That's good. That's a good example too. I think there's several examples like that throughout history that you can think of, and it's wow, I mean, here's somebody standing up for what they believe in, and if they're ignored, there's grave consequences. So good point. All right, this one is for Melanie. These next few questions are kind of more about working in a data related field. The first set of questions were more beginning in your journey and how did you get to where you are. So Melanie, can you tell us a little bit about the type of work that you do, and what is it about your work that you particularly enjoy?
Oh, great question. Thank you. I love what I do. I feel like my whole career has built up to the role that I'm in today. Leading operations, which is what I do now and have done for a couple jobs back too. It's a very broad thing. I'm part of the leadership team in my current company. I help to set strategy for the business and deal with our investors. But I'm also responsible for our product development team, our communications with our loan borrowers, because we're on a loan program, and also all of the business analytics. I'm also responsible for all business administration, right? So right now I have a very broad business job. Earlier in my career, I had very specific, more analyst type roles, right? But this is kind of an example of a career path where you start off becoming the master of the understanding of what's driving the business, right? And how to tell that story, and it can grow into where you're actually running the business using those same analytics, right? So the really cool thing about my current job is we literally use Tableau to run the business. So we've got all of our data running through Tableau from numerous sources, and it's the primary data insights tool for the business. So in addition to that, we're a fairly small business, so that makes me our sole Tableau developer as well, which is actually, what I do for fun, right? Because with Tableau, you build it once and then it just runs and it's beautiful, right? So, I'll carve out an hour or two here and there, build something new, and that's just my fun time, and go back to my regular job.
You're pretty busy, Melanie. Wow. Okay, that's excellent.
Oh, no, go ahead, Anna.
Oh,
no,
I'm so sorry.
From my perspective, it's the best of both worlds, right? Because I love running the business side of my job and then geeking out on Tableau every chance I get, right?
And I like that you made the connection that I think if you can make a name for yourself with understanding the business just through your own curiosity and analytical skills, it can help elevate your career. And sounds like you're a pretty good example of that. And I think that's a good reminder for a lot of folks earlier on.
For sure. It's an enabling tool, right? I mean, my company, my consulting company, when I was delivering Tableau dashboards prior to this, the name of it was Empower. It's empowering, right?
Exactly.
I mean, earlier in my career, I've always been an analyst, or at least had an analyst sort of role in every job I've had. And, I used to have to go through the development process to get these things built, right? I used to have to wait a year for my project to get prioritized. And So yeah, all of these things are now at my fingertips. So,
It's a
and
game
the awesome,
changer.
it's
It
great.
is.
So,
no, sorry, go ahead. Finish.
Oh, no, I just, another thing is that I have the ability to connect with my staff in my role, which I also very much enjoy. I do a lot of staff management. And, so, to me, the big fun challenge of where I am today is, helping my staff to feel engaged and motivated and successful and empowered, right? So all of those things as well, and mentoring, folks to the extent that I'm able to do so. So, I guess 20 years in, right? This is what the career can be, starting off on the analyst path.
Excellent. That's a good reminder. All right, so next question is for Michelle. Michelle, in your experience, are there differences in the professional lives of women and men? And what in particular stands out to you the most?
So right off the bat, yes, there are differences, or at least in my experience across my career. Across the board, women have fewer opportunities for mentorship and sponsorship. They end up with fewer opportunities for promotion because of that. They're given less actionable feedback and reviews that help them actually improve. Unconscious bias leads to reviews that are based more on personality than performance. Men are seen as having potential, while women need to hit every requirement before even considered for a role. And women are also expected to do the invisible work that help keep things running happily and well. And this includes things like planning celebrations, taking notes, scheduling meetings and events, and none of that is ever considered in performance evaluations. I've had an incredibly successful, rewarding career, but it's not always been easy, and I've had to work harder to get less than many of my male peers. Some examples of challenges I've faced: I've had male peer team members asked to present my work to senior leadership, and I'm not even invited to the meeting. Seeing men with less experience, less professional development, and providing less to the organization get promoted ahead of me. And at times I've been unable to get title change or get opportunities for interviews, even if I'm qualified for the job. So I've definitely seen differences.
I think a lot of us have felt this, what you're explaining, and it's almost like I feel like sometimes we have to be silent about it. It's like we've been taught that we just smile and nod, and I feel like our male counterparts wouldn't do that. It's so silly of me, but and I had mentioned this earlier to Steph and Jen and Karen. There's a song by Taylor Swift called "The Man," and I love it. I don't know if anyone's heard that, but I mean, it talks a little bit about how, if we act a certain way, which is the same way as our male counterpart, like how it's taken a different way. And I actually want to direct my next question to Steph specifically, because she was talking about advocacy, and I've felt, and Michelle might also feel this way after what you just said, but I felt that if I try to advocate for myself, I suddenly get labeled as something, because what could be assertiveness in one person could be aggression in another. And when we try to advocate, that's one of those things. It's like, how do you toe that line? So I really have this question, like I said, to Steph, but I feel like all of us could come away with something. So, and if anyone in participant too, if you want to chat anything, but I'm really curious if you have any advice for navigating these traditional biases of, again, like women's personalities, they may be too aggressive versus assertive, or meek, even the other way, like, oh, we're too quiet, we don't speak up, so they're not going to get the job. So it's almost like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Curious what you think of that one, Steph.
Yeah, well, I feel like I was meant to say something on the topic after Michelle, because Michelle, thank you, one, for sharing your truth, because I think every single one of the panelists was nodding like, yep, I identify with that. Oh, yep, check that box. Like, saw somebody get promoted ahead of me, didn't get invited to something, even though the person who got invited was like totally tangential to the relationship, and I was the relationship owner, right? Like, check that box. And it, to me, is like very easy to get very emotional about those types of things. So Anna, to maybe answer your question in kind of a 3-part answer. So I, in the span of 6 months, got this feedback on a review of my performance. The first was, you're just not confident enough in how you present your ideas, and you really, like, you should be more confident in that. 6 months later, after taking that feedback, I'm presenting my ideas, I'm pulling my seat up to the table, and I get the feedback, you're just too assertive. Really, you need to stand down. And I'm like, okay, so this is the double-edged sword that everybody's been telling me exists my entire career. Found it, nailed it, got it. So again, very easy to get emotional there and feel like the world is happening to you and just feel very frustrated. That's only natural to me. And it's ironic that we're at a Tableau, user group discussion panel, is like, look at the data, right? Statistically speaking, this is the feedback that women get as they navigate their corporate careers. We are not confident enough, but then we over-index the other way, and now we're too assertive. And so what that causes is us to have to like toe the line of being just confident enough, but not scaring anybody by being overly thoughtful in what our ideas are. And so I think it does help to like know that, again, statistically speaking, this is an uphill battle that all women are facing. And when you have that data in your pocket, you can call it like you see it. So in my last review, when I was given the feedback about my assertiveness, I was like, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so excited to dig deeper into that. One of the things that I also experienced 6 months ago was that I wasn't confident enough. So I would love for us to discuss kind of the gap in between, because if you look at all of the data, this is feedback oftentimes given to women. I'm experiencing it in real time, so I'd love to discuss the middle ground here. And then once you've had that dialogue, and that can be very uncomfortable, right? So if it's uncomfortable for you to bring it up with whoever's giving you that feedback, tell them it's making you uncomfortable. This is a vulnerable moment for me. I don't like to ask these types of questions, but I feel like it's my responsibility because I want to have a big career here. I want to have a big career in general. And so having radical candor and dialogue around this is only going to be able to improve my impact and improve our relationship. So then once you've called it like you see it, ask for a different behavior. So one of the things that I've been really thoughtful about doing since getting this feedback is, let's not wait for the next 6 months to go by and then me feel like whiplash on my review, or a year to go by. If there's a moment in a meeting where you find that I'm being too assertive, pull me aside after the meeting and let's discuss it. I want to know specifically what I said that made me come across as too assertive in that capacity. Or if it's on the other side and I'm not showing up to the meeting and pulling my chair up to the table like you'd expect me to, call me aside after the meeting and tell me specifically what I did in that meeting that could have been improved. If we don't do this real-time feedback and we do wait for these large tranches of time to go by, then the feedback is very blanket and it's not very actionable. So to summarize, 1, know the data. This is something we're all dealing with. 2, call it like you see it, even if it's uncomfortable. And 3, ask for a different behavior so that you can actually receive the feedback in real time and make changes and adjustments rather than waiting for 6 months or a year to go by to find out that you are, whiplashing through corporate America.
That's good. I've got a question for Selma. Selma, have you ever experienced being the only woman on a team? And if so, did that change the team dynamic any, and how so?
For sure. So I would say for the majority of my career, I have been the only woman on the team. I think Carter's is the first place where I was on a team where it was relatively like evenly distributed. And interestingly enough, I think it's noteworthy too that at the beginning of my career, my first 2 roles, I was the only woman individual contributor, but my leaders were females, right? So there was that like level of representation, seeing, okay, there's a woman in a leadership position, something that I aspire to be in. How does she handle that role? How does she really like step in and own her voice? And it was a really good learning experience too, because I saw sometimes those pitfalls were kind of what we've been talking about in terms of reviews and feedback, where they didn't have allies and they would have, some of those kind of pitfalls and double-edged sword issues that they'd have to kind of deal with. And so it was a really big learning experience for me. When I switched over to corporate and started working in data and analytics and on data science teams, I was literally the only female on the team, right? So from my colleagues and peers to leaders, I was the only woman. And I think that the way that it shifts the dynamic, I'll give an example, but I don't think that it's any different kind of from what we've been talking about. I noticed at NCR, as we were working on cross-functional projects with different teams, I would come to the meeting, I would be the only woman at the meeting. I was always asked to take notes, and I was always asked to schedule the meetings. And I've always been like, I think because those first two roles I had women leaders, right? Like I saw them owning their voice and owning their role. I had a great example and had something to kind of help support me. I went to my leader and I went to my boss and I felt empowered to say something. And I said, like this has been happening. I don't feel comfortable. I don't know if it's because I'm just super organized. I hate scheduling meetings though. But I can't tell, and it makes me uncomfortable. And he's been such, I think in the chat too, I've mentioned that I have a male mentor who's been really instrumental to my career growth. And he's one of them. He's such a big ally, where I told him, this is happening. I don't feel comfortable with it. And I don't know what to do about it. What advice do you have for me? And he said, don't do it. He's like, don't wait for them to tell you to schedule the meetings, ask somebody else to do it. And he made a conscious effort, and it was very noticeable in those meetings where when it was time to kind of delegate those tasks, he wouldn't ask me to do it every time. And he would make sure that in those meetings, right, he was very supportive in making sure that those tasks wouldn't go to me all the time. And I felt very kind of empowered again to step into that role, right, like to step into my voice and really own it. I think the dynamic, whether we're conscious of it or not, shifts because you don't have kind of peer that you can relate to, right? Like when you're the only woman. And I think a lot of times that when that happens, we end up overcompensating. But I think that if we have strong allies and we feel empowered, that dynamic change or difference in the dynamic isn't necessarily a bad thing. I've often found that I can thrive in either situation.
This has been an incredible talk, kind of feeling like, hey, I'm not the only one that's experienced these things. I think a lot of us are nodding and saying that. And what's interesting is that a lot of these problems or things that we've experienced, it's almost as if we kind of knew some of this might happen, right? I mean, we've been hearing, I think Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique in like the early 60s. And yet the problems still kind of persist. But we walk into it thinking we're beyond that. And then all of a sudden, this unexpected, wait a second, are we dealing with this? So I have a question for Candra. Has there been in your career an unexpected challenge that you've run into, something that maybe somebody else would have expected maybe a few years before, and now we're in the, what is this, 2021 now? Last year, I skipped that one. But what has there been, and just really in general, something that's been an unexpected challenge? And do you have any advice for someone who might run into the same obstacle?
Yeah, so I mean, it's none of it has been unexpected. I mean, it's just more of the flavor of like how it's been delivered to you is a bit different. And so like I kind of resonate, like all the things that everybody said so far really kind of resonate with me, especially the note-taking piece, which I adamantly refuse to do. But I think the thing that was kind of like it changes from my first part of my career, which is, you're intimidating, because I tend to be assertive, right? There's like no kind of, I don't tap dance around much of anything. And like, I wasn't sure how to take it because I was like, well, I'm not doing anything different than anybody else is. But then, honestly, towards the latter part of my career now, I own that. And the one thing I say is, I'm not intimidating, you're intimidated, and there's a difference. And honestly, the spaces in which I move, like obviously, being kind, I'm a kind person. I'm all these things. And so if you're inferring, assumptions about me, whether it's because that I'm a woman or a Black woman specifically, because I mean, there's levels to this, right? And so like, I'm being able to kind of call a lot of that stuff out, even the way that I wear my hair. Like the things that how people would talk to me, like being surprised that I'm technical, but I'm the executive director of analytics and insights. Why is that surprising to you? And so like one of the things that, that I like had to take a step back is I do have to show you who I am, and I'm not afraid to do that, right? And I'm not going to shrink myself to make you feel comfortable, right? And that was the, it was kind of the unexpected, like, where I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I got to kind of slide my credentials across the table. I never planned to do that, and I hate doing that. But if that's the way that you're going to acknowledge that I'm in that space and I'm supposed to be here, then like let's rock and roll. And so that's kind of kind of the thing that's been unexpected, not really, but like the way that, it's kind of, been federated down to me is the biggest piece. So I just own that I'm assertive, and, bossy, whatever word you like makes you comfortable to describe me. But at the end of the day, I'm going to get shit done and it's going to be great. And at the end of, and it's just is what it is. Right. And so, and that's a leadership style that I own who I am, and I'm not going to shrink myself because you're intimidated by a woman that owns her opinions, or that knows that she belongs somewhere, or that she doesn't want to be the note taker. And the way that I get around that is by basically saying, hey, I want to be present in this meeting, and I'm not able to do that when I'm taking notes. So I was like, you can bring your administrative assistant, you can do however you want to solve that problem, but honestly, it's going to take away from my ability to participate here. And that's how, I've kind of landed that plane sometimes, across my career. So
that's good practical advice. And I really like what you said about making the distinction between you not being intimidating, but somebody else feeling intimidated. Like I haven't heard it put that way before, but that's a really good point.
Like your insecurities about, yourself should not reflect on me. And if they do, and if they do, then let's talk about it. Like, why do I make you uncomfortable? Kind of what Steph was talking about, like kind of laying bare the things that they're talking about. Like, so if they're saying I'm, you're over indexing on confidence, well, give me, let's talk through that. Right. And usually when they talk through examples and they lay that stuff bare, they kind of know, oh, this is really, yeah, I guess it's not as bad as I, kind of thought it was. And they start backing away from a lot of that stuff. Right. They kind of start looking at internal. So.
No, that's good. Thank you so much for sharing that. We've got one more little section, so I'm going to address the next question to Michelle, but I will tell panelists we need to try to get through this next question, if at all possible, this next little section in about 5 minutes, if we want to allow for any Q&A. But first question is to Michelle. Michelle, considering your career path, what advice would you have for someone who wants to work in a tech-related field and maybe isn't working in the industry now?
So the great thing about working in tech is there's so much opportunity to learn that doesn't require classroom study. There's a ton of material available out on the internet. There are webinars, there are blog posts. People are happy to contribute their time. And I know it can be really hard to find time if you're a working mom, especially with younger kids. But if you can carve out even a little, it makes such a big difference. Practice, either as part of your professional development at work or on your own if necessary. And the biggest thing that I did at pretty much every job that I've had to translate into a job that you might not be interested in into one that you want is to look for projects that can help add value, even if they fall outside your day job. In particular, look at things that help you learn something or show off your skills in a way that might not get visibility in your day job. Solve a tricky, sticky problem, be helpful, and don't be afraid to take credit for your work.
Thank you, Michelle. And the last question, we're going to kind of talk to everybody, but one of the things that we talked to offline a little bit was how 2020, and we talked about this a little earlier too, how 2020 impacted women disproportionately than men. I mean, I don't think that there's anything to argue about it, but then another side of that is maybe people could be more aware of it as well. So just to talk to everybody on this issue and just in general, what do you think we should do collectively to create more opportunities for women to build careers in data and technology? I mean, we're in a space that used to be a man space, but there's room for everybody. There's enough pie to go around. How could we support each other? And also I could take chat answers as well. So I think I'll let Steph, if you want to take this one first, and then we have a few more minutes. We can kind of go around with a quick answer on this one.
Yeah, so the question was, what do we think we should do collectively to create more opportunities for women to build careers in data and technology? I think the first is that we should invest in ourselves. So Michelle, I thought, made a really thoughtful comment of like, if you have something on your heart that you know you are meant to serve a role in the data and technology space, and you don't currently have those tools or resources or skills in your being, go and invest in yourself, whether that is in your day job, in personal development, listening to podcasts, reading books. Like, if there's anything that I know about all women, all people really, it's that we are adaptable, and there has never been a better time than now to exploit the opportunity ahead of us, to make a career change, to make a pivot, to take advantage of market trends that are emerging for the very first time. So I think the blanket statement there is invest in yourself, do the thing that you've been putting off, knowing that it's going to really launch you into the next level of your career.
And I don't know if we talked earlier about we can raise hands and whoever wants to take the next this question again.
Yeah, I'll take it. I think, of course, definitely what Steph said is, investing in yourself. But I also think that we need to support equity in these careers, right? So like policies that disproportionately affect women, like paid maternity leave, pay transparency, right? So a lot of times people are like, oh, it's a pipeline problem, or it's because we don't have enough mentors. It's maybe some of that, but it might also be because there's asymmetrical information, right? Look, if we're not to, steal Karen's preview to her data storytelling things, but if you look at why these gaps persist or why women are leaving the tech space, right? Like those are that's why we're not ascending to the levels of leadership, because we're having to exit out because of family decisions, or because, we're having to make these hard choices. But also, like, on the front end of it, is as women, we need to release ourselves of the requirement that we have to check every box in order to apply for that job, right? And so, like, if there's 10 requirements, like, and you meet 8 of them, do it, right? Don't exclude yourself, because I bet that there's some underqualified human that's not you that's going to apply for that job and get considered. And so I think there's some of that, which is like saying, you know what? Let's just do this. And if you feel like you can be successful in that role, apply for it. Don't exclude yourself from this space because you don't think that you meet every, checkbox on the requirements, summary. So that's, I guess, is the biggest piece for me.
And I think so I think that really kind of loops into with my answer. I think it's twofold, right? Like systemically what we can do, and then personally what we can do for ourselves, like as a favor, apply, don't not apply and exclude yourself. I think systemically what I've seen in terms of like hiring patterns, right? So oftentimes we'll ask people, well, how much did you make at your last job? To level set kind of what we should expect to pay them at this job. And we have made the argument at my past organization where that just perpetuates pay inequity, right? Mm-hmm. Like that, if you're going to base how much you paid this person off of their last job, you're perpetuating that pay inequity. And so I think that's systemically what you can do. personally, as a woman, never accept a job without going back and negotiating, right? Like that's a hard lesson that I had to learn when I figured out that my male counterpart, who had less education than I did and less experience, was earning a lot more than I was, and I had to now come up with this argument, like, not that he makes more, but why I should make more, right? So it's like systemically, how do we enable women in this space, and then personally, how do we do it too? And I think it has not been lost on me that in the past year, the colleagues that have left our organization, our team, willingly, right, because we had some org changes, have been women with small children. And at the same time, I'm a woman with a small child at home, and having felt like I needed to overcompensate for that, right? Like to be like, well, I can stay late for this meeting or join late for this meeting, but I now have to figure out who's going to pick up my son, things like that, because I didn't want that to happen to me. So I think the other thing too is, like, if you're in a position of leadership, really be an ally and give your female colleagues the opportunity, because often they will rise to the occasion just like any other human would, but less often they are given the same opportunities.
So I want to turn the tables a little bit. Women have been preaching to the choir for years, and we still need to support each other. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But at the end of the day, men are still in more positions to help make equality a reality. They need to step up, be part of the solution. Mentor and sponsor women, provide actionable feedback, recognize their work, ensure that you're treating men and women the same. And the last note, we need to define what success means to us and not to the world around us. I decided a long time ago I wasn't interested in management, and I struggled because I felt like it was important to provide role models for women coming up after me, but I chose to focus on informal leadership instead, and that's allowed me to have the work-life balance I want and get focused on the things that utilize my skill and inspire my will or passion.
That's a really good point. I like that you said that, because it's just what's one success for somebody isn't necessarily mean success for somebody else.
So I just put that in the chat, informal leadership. I'm gonna write that down and put that on the wall, because we're always, as women, we're leading other people are watching us no matter what, right? Males and females. So this isn't just women, but as women, because we want people to, as you just said, we want the next group to have a little bit less trouble at the table, and then the next group and the next group. Let's show them what this looks like. We don't have to be management necessarily. When I was in teaching, I didn't want to be a principal. I wanted to be a teacher. And hopefully I led those kids to see somebody who is a leader and a female, as a female. I think we may be out of time. We did get some Q&A in there, and we've answered some of them. If y'all have any other questions, Karen, I don't think we have a lot of time to read these. Are there any you wanted to read?
Sorry, I can't even see them, because if you guys have noticed, like with me sharing my screen, you may have noticed it's already kind of an issue. So I haven't even checked.
Well, it looks like a lot of the questions that were asked were ones that we answered along the way. So it looks like that we're good there. And that's actually great, because a lot of the questions had to do with mentorship and things like that. So I want to go ahead and change gears here, because it is 2:00 and we need to
but perhaps we can keep it going. If anybody does have questions or wants to continue the chat, it's feel free in the chat,
in the Q&A, yeah. Or the chat. Q&A or perfect.
Y'all ready to go to the next one? Before we do that, I just want to thank our panel so much. It's awesome to have 5 people. I think last year we did something like this.